So I'm speaking tonight with Joey Guarascio, a guy that I can't imagine a better Twitter follow than Joey in the strength and conditioning world. And of course, I like it because you're so speed and power based. You know, when I think of speed and power based, I can't name too many S&C coaches that are like that. You know, I know that Alabama that went that direction last year. You know, and that worked out pretty good for them. There's a lot of S&C programs that aren't speed and power based, and we'll get to that in a minute. The first question I'm going to ask may be a weird one to you. You know, you talk about periodization, and sometimes I say that I don't believe in periodization, but then again, there's like, you know, if I think about it, there's the football season, that's kind of a period, and then there's the winter, that's kind of a period, and then there's a track season, that's kind of, so we do slightly different things. So, but you talk a lot about periodization and you have these blocks and things like that. Do you ever have a period where you do not care about sprint speed?
No, I mean, sprinting's a priority year round for me. You know, it's the residual effect of it is that you don't train it. If you don't train it, you lose it. So to me, it's if it's valuable, if it's important to me, it's emphasized year round, just at different volumes. You know, and that's the thing with that is I have to keep it in year round. So like even right now, so we didn't make a bowl game, right? Unfortunately, it is what it is. And my guys are at home. The emphasis is short accelerations. Like, so the runs I'm giving them are acceleration based. I'm just feeding them and trying to retain whatever abilities that they had at the end of the season going into early off season. Because I know in early off season, even in the wintertime, we're gonna do a lot of sprint work. We're gonna do a lot of jumping. We're gonna do, you know, there's gonna be a heavy emphasis to that as we move into later in the year. So yeah, go ahead.
So when you have blocks, you don't have blocks where, let's say you have 6 different blocks during the year. You don't have like 3 of those blocks where you say, we're not worried about sprinting.
No, it's just at a lower volume is emphasized in that period. So I mean, like early on, you know, we're gonna take an approach where okay, we're gonna do a little more weight room work volume wise in the early off season. That just means that there's this inverse relationship between my sprint volume and my weight room. So as we start to get into a period where we're getting closer to the season where it's more specific, I'm increasing my sprint volume like through the roof. Like we're going 300, 400 yards total in a session with our skill guys, which is a lot. And it's just the volume of the weight room just flops. So it'll be okay. I'm at 800 reps for 4 weeks early off season, and then all of a sudden now I'm at 400 reps moving into summer in the weight room, and I'm at, you know, up to 800 yards of sprint work going into the in season versus I'm at 300 early on. You know, it just always that I'm always battling that inverse relationship because you only got one bucket.
Yep.
Right? You only got one bucket. And if you fill the bucket, you know, and you keep trying to pour more in there, that's where kids get hurt. You know, overtraining and just maladaptation in general. Right? And so we want to avoid that at all costs. You know, like when you talk about periodization, like it's just a point of reference for me, right? Like it's just a way to organize and classify what I'm doing in that 4-week block.
I like that.
And I like to keep it in 4 weeks, but the thing is this: is like I don't even have 4 weeks usually. You know,
Right.
I don't usually have like consecutive 4-week blocks. I have like this off season coming up. I have 6 weeks before we start spring ball, so it's not even a 4-week block. So you know, it's just a way. It's a point of reference. It's a way to create a system of organization and to get some progressive overload and to figure out ways to load these guys the right way because that's all it comes down to is prescription. Right.
So I like that it sounds like that even though some of the points of emphasis change, the only thing that changes in your sprint priority is the amount of volume. Am I correct with that?
Correct.
Yeah, I like that a lot because I think a lot of people get away from it, and that's really scary. I was going to tell you a story. It's a crazy story. I had a kid in 2015. He was a great sprinter, all-stater, pushing 23 miles an hour. Went to college, very much a volume program in college. He quit after his junior year. And for the last 3 years, he's just dedicated himself to be the best person in the weight room he could possibly be. You know, he's one of those guys, you know, that's been working out 2 hours a day, totally ripped. He looks great. And I met up with him in Denver last week, and he did some demonstrations for me at a speed track. And we tested his speed. This is crazy. 6 years after he was a 23-mile-an-hour guy, he couldn't break 17.
I believe it. Yeah. I mean,
I'm like,
well, it's strength is task specific. So like, I mean, and strength to me, strength is a misused word, because right, like you have starting strength, you have accelerated strength, you have reactive strength, like you have all these things. But you know, sprinting is a skill, right? It's a skill, and if you don't train a specific skill, I don't care what the skill is. If you don't continually train that skill, there's going to be a decrement in it. It's going to decrease. It's going to happen.
And so that's what I told that story, because I will always tell that story from now on. But a guy can look physically fit and be physically fit, but still be diminished in his speed if he doesn't train it. You agree?
Agree. You know, and I see, you know, I've had kids, everyone's had that kid that the 500-pound squatter and he can't break 5.0, you know, and he's a running back and he's 200 pounds and he's ripped and he looks beautiful, and then
Yep.
he's slow, you know, and I think it boils back to determining what's important, what's an important athletic trait for some of these kids, especially when it pertains to speed. And to me, it's you know, I saw the argument, someone, I think rugby strength coach, because you know he's good for starting arguments on Twitter. You know, he put something up along the lines of like, yeah, I had a kid that couldn't trap bar deadlift, you know, 275 pounds, but he ran 10.3 or something, right? And like we've all had those kids. But I bet if you got his RSI, if you measured his rebound test or a depth jump with that kid, I bet he pops off the ground. So, you know, I think it always boils back to what's important for the task at hand. If maximal speed, like you said, the kid that ran almost 23, you know, as soon as he starts doing, you know, just lifting the emphasis and stop sprinting, he's going to lose a lot of that reactive ability, right? He's going to lose that bounce, that pop, you know, that golf ball on concrete. You know, he's going to lose that. And to me, that's probably one of the biggest indicators to speed is reactive strength. You know,
I believe it.
You know, I mean, he might be fast up to 5 yards just because he's strong, right? He's overcoming his inertia. He has the ability to have some starting strength. But then after that, what is it going to look like? Because after that, I mean, it's relying on the stress shortening cycle because of the ground contact times, right? Especially sprinting.
And it's crazy. I went back. It was so mind-blowing to me seeing this guy that used to be so fast, and he looks better than he ever looked in high school. You know, I mean, he is just I mean, really in great physical condition. But he didn't even, not only did he lose his bounce, he lost his mechanics. That people forget that if we drift, our sprint mechanics might be the first thing that goes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a motor pattern, right? Like you got to rehearse the motor pattern to keep it efficient. You know, I mean, you talk about intermuscular coordination. It's the brain speaking to the muscles in a fast and efficient manner, getting them to fire the right way. When you stop doing a specific movement, you're going to lose that efficiency. You know, I looked at it like when I tore my pec, I wasn't able to snatch for like almost a year. You know, and I go back and I looked at one of the videos of me snatching for the first time, and man, it just felt so wonky and uncoordinated. And it was like, well, why? You know, like I've been sprinting, I've been jumping, I've been doing all this stuff. But again, it's a specific movement pattern. You know, that's why skill acquisition is so specific to what you're doing. Like you have to practice something that's in the bandwidth of that movement, or else you're not going to get it's not going to be retained.
Right. I love that. I was with Brian Kula last weekend that trains McCaffrey, and I was watching him doing a lot of contrast training in the weight room. Do you do any contrast training?
Yeah, we definitely do. You know, I really like to pair plyometrics with specific strength activities. You know, I see Dan's on here. There's some stuff that I stole from Dan. You know, if you're going to do anything bilateral, you better pair it with something that's going to be unilateral, or it's going to be stagger stance, or, you know, so I think there's some carryover to that for sure. And then, you know, I really like Everyone in the world has kind of been familiar with the French contrast method now, even though majority of people do the bastardized version of it, which is good. I like pairing accelerated jumps with barbell jumps, with loaded jumps, and then going into regular jumps. I really like, uh, you know, doing some heavy squatting, even getting some bounds in post. I just finding ways to complement that bilateral heavy lift with something coordinated, right? Because I mean, everyone has felt it before. You do a deadlift and you're fatigued, you feel uncoordinated, and it's just refreshing that motor pattern, that brain into, okay, this is more of a coordinated action. It's more it's more reflexive. It's more reactive as far as just just getting that brain to fire again the right way. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. That's a bad answer, but you get what I'm saying.
I got it. One of the things that I've really struggled with, I thought hard about this like 25 years ago, and I'm constantly thinking along these terms, that I'm a person that really, really believes in repetition. Mm. That, Johnny Wooden's 8 laws of learning: explanation, demonstration, imitation, repetition, 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 repetition. But I'm also somebody that believes in providing a training stimulus that creates adaptation. So at first look, those two things look totally opposite of each other. I love what Dan John says in his presentation and in his books and our podcast, to embrace the obvious. To me, the obvious for speed is you got to sprint. For a baseball player, you got to hit and repeat that. For a basketball player, you better not drift too far from shooting. There are obvious things that need repeated. But then there's also this thing about, well, if we keep doing the same shit, we're not going to get better. How do you balance that in your mind?
Well, I mean, for me with football, you want to create, like you said, so like creating constraints and drills for them to learn that self-learning process, right? Like, okay, hey, like wickets is a perfect example for me. Like when we run wickets, I barely coach, like barely. Like, it's going to be minimal coaching because the drill itself the constraints of the drill are going to emphasize what I'm going to coach anyway, for the most part. All right, so it's about creating constraints that are going to lead to self-learning and to changes in motor patterns and changes in motor behavior. But I think the way for me is football itself is such a chaotic game, right? There's so much chaos in it. And I want to make sure, like you said, I want to rep the fundamentals and the athletic traits, like the general athletic traits. And then I want them to go ahead and take those and put them in a chaotic environment and use them in that chaotic environment. And that's where the learning for me comes into play. So that's as simple as, okay, we're going to do acceleration training. Okay, or we're going to do maximum velocity training. But now I want to do maximum velocity training where you have to trail him and he might have 45-degree cuts into it. Because now the drill is, it's the skill of running it at extremely fast speed is still there. But now you're adding another layer to the drill that's going to get closer to the game, where they're going to have to learn and perceive the environment. They're going to have to not only perceive the environment, but also manipulate speeds based on an opponent, which is going to be very, very similar to what's going to happen in the game. And then you turn and take that in and move it. Okay, we're going to do that, and then we're going to go right into 7-on-7, where that right there should just be a completely chaotic environment where, like you said, like you're just, the play. If I'm on defense, I know the play, but then after the ball snapped, it's all reactive. I know my alignment. Okay, but after that, everything's completely reactive. But I want to see those same mechanics that we preached and we've repped 1,000 times, right? If we rep a 90-degree cut, like I want to see the same mechanics in the 90-degree cut in that 7-on-7 period as I saw in that change of direction session we did. Or, if we're doing, we rep maximum velocity, we ran wickets, we ran flies, all those things. When my receiver catches the ball, I want to be able to see him when he does create separation, get upright, have front side mechanics, okay, continually gain speed, all right, throughout the duration of that play. So I think for me, it's pretty easy for that to occur. It's just going general to specific. you know, just
Gotcha.
move closer to the sport. And I think I get that transfer, right? You have to rep the basics, right? The fundamentals. I call them the fundamentals, like the athletic fundamentals. You know, I saw like you had Lee Taft on here earlier, like his shuffle progressions and all the things that he does and teaching those things, like those are fun, those are athletic fundamentals, right? And we don't have the ability like we did, you know, 20, 30 years ago where you get in PE. You're playing tag and you're realizing, okay, this works to get away from this kid, this works to get away. Kids don't do that anymore. They don't have the PE
Well, we also don't get multi-sport athletes as much
class.
as we used to as well. I mean, like, you know, the amount of footwork that a basketball player learns by playing the game,
Mhm.
uh, it's that stuff's hard to teach,
Yeah.
you know, in a weight room.
Well, I look at it like this. So like I picked up jujitsu probably like 5 years ago. Okay. And when you're just drilling with your partner and you're learning, everyone can do whatever technique you're working on almost flawlessly, right? At a slow pace. And then all of a sudden, you know, at the end of class, it's like, okay, we're going to go for this technique. We're going to do a 2-minute live round. You bump hands, you go. And then out of nowhere, with the speed increasing, with the reactiveness that you have to have, all these things, it's like almost impossible to fully translate that technique into that realm, right? That setting, right? Why? Because I haven't repped it enough, right? I haven't
Right.
repped it enough. So when I take it from a controlled environment, which all of our training, like all football training outside of football is a controlled environment. Like even our agility training, the constraints are the drills get so limited because of the constraints that we have. Like we can't have contact, you know, we can't have formations, we can't have all these things. Like it's a controlled environment. It's a small-sided game, right? Like everyone loves the European term of small-sided game. It's a restricted version of the game. Well, that's controlled. Once you go in the game, it's chaotic. I mean, it's you have to utilize all these fundamentals, these athletic fundamentals that you've built up in these controlled environments, and you have to be able to use them in the sport when it's chaotic, when you don't know when things are coming, when you have to be extremely reactive. Okay, when you have to express certain movement patterns that you know should be ingrained in your head, right? Why do we look at injuries? Like, why are there so many injuries in deacceleration? That's you know that's a big topic right now. I can tell you right now, us training deacceleration drastically dropped the amount of ligament, tendon, and soft tissue injuries we had. Drastically. Why? Because now we repped it so many times that when they put it into live action where they had to react and drop it down, they still were keeping or maintaining good positions. You know, and then you talk about the tissue tolerance that comes along with the repetition, because that's a big part of it too, is you accumulate a certain amount of volume, you become robust to that volume. You know, so I think that plays a huge part of it as well.
I like that. I love the idea of, okay, there's sprinting, and that's the repetition.
Yeah.
That's the general. That's the fundamental.
Mhm.
But then there's the adaptive, which is the chaotic, the addition of things. And one of the things you mentioned, Lee Taft, and Lee Taft used a term that I will use forever now, is that if it's all repetition and no chaos, we develop a lazy brain. We don't challenge the brain to adapt. And so I think that's what you're doing when you're talking about different angles and tag and 7-on-7 and things like that. You can't have a lazy brain and do that stuff.
No.
But you also have to have the fundamentals in order to do those things in the first place. So what I kind of see is, would you agree with the fact that we have tons of stuff we have to repeat and tons of stuff that we have to adapt to, and we have to do both?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you hit on the head. You have to do both because, like, yeah, okay, if I go rehearse this, and like you say, acceleration, well, that's great. And now I'm a running back, and I get the ball handed to me, and now I'm accelerating. But there's a linebacker running smack down the A gap in front of my face. Like, if I haven't already experienced something along those lines, I'm not going to know how to handle that situation, and it's going to end up catastrophic. Either me getting knocked on my head, or even worse. You know, and we see it all the time. You know, why do you see like a perfect example is like all these soft tissue injuries in the NFL, right? You see all these skill guys getting soft tissue injuries in the NFL, and a lot of them have to do with maximum velocity sprinting. It's like, okay, they go to footwork king or whoever the hell it is, right? All these receivers go to these guys, and they do all these short area drills. They do all these short area drills where they're in anterior pelvic tilt, they're flexed at the hip, they're flexed at the knee, okay? And then you watch, they create separation in the game, they catch the ball and they try to open up and they pull their hamstring. Well, why is it? It's because of the fact that they haven't rehearsed the mechanics for that specific movement enough in the off season to be retained, right? And then you talk about tissue tolerance. If I haven't repped it, my tissue is not, my tissue quality is not able to handle a lot of that volume or high intensity at that volume or high intensity at that movement. You know?
So I totally agree. I think that if you're not stressing ligaments and tendons, you're asking for an injury. And then in addition, I think one of the things that people really forget, I know there's a lot of talk by smart people these days about how high-speed sprinting inoculates or vaccinates athletes for injury. And I think the reason for that, especially if guys, I mean, I know professional athletes that don't sprint 9 months a year.
Yeah.
Literally don't sprint. I mean, like receivers in the NFL, not sprinting 9 months a year. And because they're such great athletes, they get away with it for a certain amount of time. But if you're only lifting, you know, for every contraction, there has to be a total relaxation.
Yeah.
And in like a nanosecond. And, you know, like what might happen if you're not practicing that, if you're not practicing that nanosecond contraction with a nanosecond relaxation, the lengthening of a contracted muscle is it's an injury.
Well, I think not only on top of that, but you look at, so like I did in my presentation at the TFC, is like you look at majority of these movements that occur in sport. I'll just use football because that's where, you know, most of our information came from, is these movement expressions are happening in less than half a second.
Right.
Okay. Which means that they're highly dependent on the stretch shortening cycle, no matter what position. If I'm kick sliding, my average ground contact was like 0.25 to 0.35, right? So 300ths of a second. That is a stretch shortening cycle event. You're like you said, it's rate of force development and stretch shortening cycle. That's what that is. Okay, so if you're not sprinting, which is one of the best ways to build up reactive strength, okay, strengthen tendons, strengthen ligaments, create the efficiency and the dependence on those elastic properties versus contractile properties, like you're saying, A, you're going to be slower, and B, you're going to use more metabolic resources, and then the tissue is going to, when it's fatigued, what happens? There's more of an opportunity for injury. So again, like that's more of a reason to be more dependent and train that stretch shortening cycle, whether you do it through plyometric, sprinting, whatever your method is, and it's only going to benefit that athlete. And like you said, reduce injuries. That's why I look at RSI in season. I look at reactive strength index because, and that's off a depth jump because, and Bruce Schexnayder is the one who put me onto this because he told me, he goes, when you start to overreach, the first thing that starts to go, because it's so neurally driven, is that ability to be bouncing. And then you become tissue dependent. And then when you become tissue dependent, you'll get soft tissue injuries and all kinds of other issues. He's like, it's bound to happen. So that's why, like you said, the emphasis has got to be on, you know, these guys that don't run, and then all of a sudden they go out and they, you know, and they get hurt, or they tear a ligament, they tear a tendon, or whatever it might be. It's, you know, it's like you said, like Dan Johnson, it's common sense. If they're exposed to it in the game, why would you not want to train it?
And you know what? One of the things they say is that I do run. And what I like to bring up is that running and sprinting are not alike. That running and sprinting looks different. It's neurologically different. The mechanics are different. I mean, when I see our distance kids come out and sprint with my sprinters, you can tell which kids have not been trained to sprint because it's just different. And to add on that, Dan Fichter just piped in that we want to build neural calluses, that we must practice that nervous system in order to gain protection.
Yeah. You know, but to me, it's a lack of understanding what's going on in these sports. Like we look at it and it goes back to doing a needs analysis of the sport, demands of the sport. And now more than ever, with all the technology we have, there's no excuses. right? There's no excuses. If you want to train someone to be robust and resilient to injuries, you have to know what injuries are going to occur, what are the most common injuries, and what are the mechanisms behind those injuries. A lot of these are I wouldn't say preventable, but a lot of them can be mitigated. Like, yeah, I mean, like you said, how easy is it once a week to implement some wickets and some top speed running for skill kids? And you'll see Boo also said this is the weight room sprinting takes the ceiling off the weight room because of the neural response, right? The neural training that occurs, the impulse that you gain from that. And then you look at now that they've been accustomed to like Dan said, the callous, they're callous to this stress because it's a stress, right? Like I go and sprint at maximal speed, it is a stress. If I were to go run a 40 right now, I'd pop my hamstring because I haven't ran past about 15 yards in over like 3 months. Like it is a specific stress that you have to get kids used to running or used to and robust and resilient to.
Well, Joey, you might not be fast enough to pop your hamstring though.
Oh man, I mean, I you're doing a lunge. I'm old now. I'm officially washed up now.
Oh, I've seen you run. You're okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned something, and you talk a lot about RSI.
Yeah.
We have all types of, we have middle school track coaches that sign up for TFC. If somebody has, this is the first time they ever heard anybody say RSI. Explain it to somebody that doesn't know anything about it.
So the easiest way to describe it is I'm measuring, like you ever drop a golf ball on concrete and see how high it bounces? I'm measuring your stiffness. That's all I'm measuring. I'm measuring your bounce. Okay. I'm trying to see how you can minimize ground contact and pop off that ground to maximal height. That's what I'm looking for. So basically like almost like a straight leg pogo off a box. Like Mel Sip would call it, it would be a drop jump, not a depth jump. So I'm looking for minimal knee bend, knee flexion, minimal hip flexion, and extremely fast ground contacts. Right, ground contacts that are going to be in the realm of like what sprinting would be.
And would a simple word, the simple word bounce, be a good word to describe RSI?
Be the easiest way to describe it. So when I talk to our football coaches, it's bounce. Because they understand that. I'm like, like when they watch a guy run, they're like, man, he's really bouncing like a deer. I'm like, yeah, he's bouncy. That's what, and then I'll be like, that's what we test in season. Like that's our RSI is bouncing. And you don't need fancy equipment. Like we have Plyomat, which I really like. It works really well for us. But you could use a Vertec. You could use a wall. You could put on a wall and just have them hop off a box and jump up and touch a certain point of the wall. Like, so you can still make it work and you can still test it. Without having, a muscle lab, friggin', what do they call it?
Right.
What I'm talking about.
And you can almost see it in an athlete. And I can remember my father was a basketball coach, and I can remember as a little kid following him around, he would point to a player and say, man, I love that kid. I love his bounce.
Yeah.
And so he was really talking about RSI, but
absolutely,
but he just called it bounce. Yep. And coaches in basketball and football and even in baseball, they want a bouncy athlete. The opposite of bouncy is something none of us want to be.
No. And like I hear it all the time when people describe 1 foot jumpers. Like in basketball, like, okay, he's a 1 foot guy. Like he jumps off 1 foot really well. Well, that's essentially that's RSI. Right, because he's in motion. He goes ahead and gets a gather step. And he's pushing off one leg. That's RSI right there for you. That's bounce. That's why I really love getting DBs that are triple jumpers, because triple jumpers, they put an extreme amount of force into the ground. Okay, an extreme amount of force. But those guys that are extremely bouncy in their breaks out of their pedal are extremely fast, because that's another that you're overloading that Achilles complex. So guys that have that high calf and that really thick Achilles that are extremely bouncy, they tend to be springy out of their break, versus those guys that you see are really strong that got to squat down lower to push out of it. It's going to spend more time in that break. So again, there's a lot of instances in football where that's a really common and it's a really valuable athletic trait to have.
And would you agree? I think people hear this and they picture, that 6'2" wide receiver that, that catches a bunch of touchdown passes. But am I right that we want bouncy big cats too?
Absolutely. Well, like I said, you look at a pass set, that's a stretch shortening activity. So a guy that's really strong, but doesn't have any bounce to him or doesn't have any elasticity to him, right? Any of that bounce to him, his set's going to be slower. Okay. It's just like sprinting, where rate of force development is extremely critical. And then reactive strength is extremely critical. And that's bounce. That's your ability to bounce. So, the best football player I've ever seen or ever worked with, was Laramie Tunsil. He's the starting left tackle he's a Pro Bowler. He plays for the Texans. He was a first round pick, all those things. What made Laramie extremely, to me, what stood out to me was his bounce. Kid can run. If he ran a 40 at his pro day or the combine, he was going to run 4.9. He was 315 pounds.
Yep.
All right. And the reason that was because it's like you watched him and he had that long calf, or he had that short calf. He had a thick Achilles. Okay. And when he jumped, he always liked to get a little bit of pick his feet up, counter movement, jump to. He didn't like to squat down, get deep, and push off that ground. He wanted to get some kind of counter movement, some bounce to it, some pretension before he took off, which is, to me, signs of, again, like he wants to utilize. What he did a really good job was he utilized his stretch shortening cycle. He utilized his elastic components versus, I'm strong. He was a strong kid. He wasn't the strongest kid by any means, but he was able to use that bounce, that stretch shortening cycle to his advantage, which made him extremely athletic and extremely fast and quick in short spaces, as well as when he opened up.
Yeah, I would say that you want to be strong and elastic if you're a big cat. I know Tristan Wirfs that, is just, I was shocked that he wasn't the first offensive tackle taken, because state champion wrestler, threw the shot put 66 feet, state champion 5 times in track and field in the throws. And, he's 322, typical 6'5", but he runs a 4.85, and he set combine records for offensive tackles. And I think he jumped almost 37 inches, and he went 10.6 in the standing long. And that's an elastic, strong, multi-sport athlete. And why in the world 3 teams would not pick him? But, he goes to Tampa Bay Bucks, and he was their best lineman last year.
Absolutely. And it's like you hit on it too. Like, you need to be strong, right? Like, the more inertia you have, the bigger you are as a person, because it all boils down to creating impulses, right? It's biomechanics 101. It's about creating an impulse to change your velocity, right? That's what it's all about when you talk about sport movement. And when you're bigger, you need more peak force to move yourself, because you're a larger mass. So that's where the maximal strength comes in. There's definitely a need for it. You're 300 pounds. You need to have certain. It's like you need the prerequisites to get in the club. Like, you need to make sure you have this adequate amount of strength to express your athleticism. Because if you don't have it there, all right, you're not going to be able to move your own body the way that you want to. But, to me, that's where relative body strength is used for big guys. That's where I do look at, okay, what's your squat compared to your body weight? Like, what's that ratio? Because that's important. At least in my mind, it's important, because it gives me a good indicator. Okay, a pull-up for a big guy, like that's a great indicator of relative body strength. I can't put an emphasis on pull-ups for big guys. I've had a kid, Manny Jones. He's coming out this year. He's at CSU. Kid weighed 280. He could do a pull-up with a 100-pound plate and a 25-pound plate, strict pull-up with it. Okay. But then you watch him in the game, and just the way he can manipulate and move his body, and people that were attacking him was because, again, that relative body strength, he was able to create an extreme amount of force and rapid force because of that. But you're right. Yeah, there is. The closer you are to the ball, you got to be able to create a large amount of peak force. You have to. That's where that maximal strength comes into play.
I'm big on record, rank, and publish. I believe it's like athletes are competitors. When you have numbers, they chase those numbers. It brings meaning and significance to the work we do. But I also say we must measure what matters.
Mhm.
But you know, like if you take your football team and run them in a 2 mile, yeah, you can record, rank, and publish that, but that doesn't matter. Your ability to run a 2 mile has no impact on winning a football game. So my question to you, what measurements to you, and some of them may be obvious, what measurements to you are obviously things that we need to measure because they really matter?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll break it into subgroups because, again, they're different. The game is different for O linemen than it is for linebackers, and it
Yep.
is for my skill guys. So for my skill guys, I really like speed components. So I'm gonna measure a fly 10. I love that part of it. Maximum velocity is a huge part of the game for those skill guys, those receivers, those corners, those safeties. Um, my running backs, I'm gonna measure that part, right? I really like measuring maneuverability, right? So
How do you
uh,
do that? What is your measurement?
a snake run. So I have a specific setup for a snake run, and they maneuver around cones, and we put gates at both sides, just like we measure a fly 10, and
Okay.
we write it down. Because maneuverability is extremely important to me as well. With those skill guys, I want to know what are their jumps increasing? That's important, right? There's a lot of situations where they're jumping. All right. Vertical and broad. Broad jump more being for the blocking collision side of it. The tackling, it's more correlated to collisions because of
Sure.
the mechanics of it. In the weight room, I do barbell jumps. I do 20% of their body weight on a bar, and I want to see what their peak velocity is.
And how
Uh,
do you measure that?
we have VMAX Pro.
Okay,
So
VMAX
you
Pro.
can use a Tendo, Jim, whatever you have, right? But I look at peak velocity because impulse is the same equation for momentum, right? It's mass times velocity. So I want to see if they're increasing their ability to apply impulse. So if the velocity increases and the mass is consistent, then guess what? They're able to produce more impulse. So that's what I'm looking there. And then, to be honest with you, we do the same thing with their squat, and we do 75% of their back squat. I want to see how fast they can move it. And that's it. I mean, I could give a shit, excuse my language. I give a shit with my corner benches. If I have had about 40 scouts coming here this year, and not one scout has asked me what a corner's bench, because that's our best prospect right now is a corner. So those are things that I'm looking at, and then acceleration too. We'll look at a 10 or a 20 on those guys. When you look at big guys, I really like jumps because it's going to tell you starting strength. I like broad jumps. I like our vertical jumps. Peak force, we're going to look at a back squat. We use 90%, and we use the same. We look at average velocity and peak velocity of that. With those big guys, I'm old school. I guess I'm a meathead. I love cleans. Starting straight tells me starting strength, accelerated strength. You got to absorb it. You got to drive. One thing I forgot to mention.
So, what is your measurement though on clean? Is it just total weight, or are you talking about bar speed again?
I'm talking about weight, because to me, and maybe this is an old-fashioned way of thinking, is if the speed isn't appropriate, the kid's not going to make the lift.
Right. Right.
And that was a Gail. Like I trained under Gail Hatch, and that's just, he always ingrained in my head. He's like, listen, if you don't pull it fast enough, it's not coming up. And we do a really good job teaching our kids the technique of missing. So I feel extreme. Like, I'm the most comfortable maxing on cleans out of any strength activity in the weight room.
That's good to know. That's a great statement. Yeah.
Because our guys know how to miss. They miss, they throw it out, they get spit out, they fall back. I don't have guys catching it in weird positions and all that, so it's an easy way to test it. It's an easy way. And to me, it's also a good way to see lower body strength, right? Because we all know the correlation that we've all seen the Russian literature on the correlation between squats and cleans. We've all seen it. They both go up together. Not that it's always causation, but there's good, strong correlation, because I know I'll get killed by the correlation crew on Twitter later on. Everyone loves to say it's not causation. I'm like, well, it's pretty close.
I don't like that crowd. That's not my crowd. Even though I have some friends in that group. But anyway, one of the things that I like to ask coaches, I just a couple things. In my first year as a basketball coach. I became a head coach in my second year, but in my first year, I learned a hell of a lot. The head coach was god awful. We went 0-25. I learned so many things. Not one thing that I wanted to do, but about 1,000 things I would never do. And I remember Stu McMillan said one time that great coaches are a lot more sure about what doesn't work than what does work. We're always forward thinking, and we know that we know that 10 years from now that we're going to be a better coach than we are now. There's no question in my mind, when I'm 72, I'll be a better coach than when I was 62. And I think that you're probably the same way. I think we all look back at dumb things we did in our early career and shake our head and we're kind of embarrassed. Describe some things that bad S&C football programs do. You don't have to name names.
Yeah.
But explain what bad looks like.
Well, I think the first one is thinking that, and I'll use me as an example. So, I'll throw myself under the buses. When I first started out at Northwestern State, I ended up becoming the director at 23 years old. All right. It just right spot, right time. And I was under the assumption, I haven't seen or done much speed work in my career coming up to that point. And I was under the assumption, okay, if our cleans go up, if I got 50 guys that can clean 300 pounds, we're going to be faster, more explosive, and we're going to win a lot of football games. And we went 4-7 that first year, and that was, we didn't look fast. We had some soft tissue injuries, and I'm like, what the hell? And it took me going to Ole Miss to see Paul Jackson implement a real true speed and power program. And, he sent me on a journey. I did a walk around the woods a little bit, trying to figure out, okay, why is he thinking this way? Why is it important? And it brought me to track, and it brought me to Charlie Francis, where that changed my career. Because I realized quickly, just like a lot of people do, that when you start talking about speed, you're not just talking about speed, you're talking about planning for speed, which is a whole science and a whole art, and it brings you 50 different avenues. So I think the myth that, hey, if we're really strong and we're really, we're really good at cleans and we're really good at squats and we got a ton of benches that are over 400, we're going to be good. You're wrong. You're wrong.
Right.
Do you have the potential to be good? Absolutely. Right. Like, I'm not saying that none of those things are wrong. They're wrong if you don't have the ability to bridge the gap to the skill that you're trying to train for.
And you may survive with that mentality if you are recruiting 5-star freaks. You may not ruin them, but I know there's a Big Ten coach or a Big Ten program that in the last, not this year, but a couple of years ago, the only thing in this S&C guy's bio was talk about how many 405 benchers they had and how many 315 cleaners they had. Those are the only two metrics that came out in his bio that I'm sure he wrote.
Yeah.
But he was a power lifter. I mean, he was a power lifter and had that mindset. And I think a lot of head football coaches buy into that as well, because that, tradition is security. It's comfortable to say this is the way, we did it back when I played at whatever and we were really good. And so my point being is that this stuff, just because you're doing things really well, there's a lot of places that aren't. Would you agree?
No, I think a lot of them, I don't know if it's a lack of understanding of what they're really trying to train. Because, like, okay, you look at that guy and it's like, you're so far off on what's an important quality and trait for this kid to be successful. Like, the only position that really could be applicable is O-line, right? Like, that's where it's going to benefit them. And then at what cost? There's a point of diminishing return. Like, I'm trying to chase this kid benches 375, and I'm spending all this resource and time on trying to get him to 400 pounds, just so I can say he benches 400 pounds. It's an ego thing. It's to say, okay, I got him to 400 pounds. Well, you spent all that time with him getting to 400 pounds, countless months and countless amount of volume and reps on this kid getting that 405 when he could be doing 15 other things that are going to be more applicable to his position. You know, and I think, like you said, you asked me the question, like, what do you test? Like, you got to test things that are relevant and important. You know, so I look at, you know, really maxing out outside. Like, the whole point people try to max out is to get a better percentage to train, or better marker to train off of, a better benchmark to train off of for the next training cycle. Like, that's where maxing out came from. Like, you know, in my presentation, you know, you look at the Russians who literally that was their sport, was to max out, only maxed out 4% of the entire training year. Out of all their volume, only 4% of it was dedicated to maxing out or hitting a 1 RM, and 2% of that 4% was in competition. And you're talking about people that this is what their life is. That's their job, is to hit a 1 RM in competition. You know, so to me, it's like I've gotten away from maxing out, period, to begin with. So, like, to me, I see people trying to boost egos and put kids in harm's way, right, to achieve a number that they probably can't even train off of. Okay. No, I get a kid, you know, max out there. I got 70 kids cheering this kid on. I got ammonia's out. He's using knee sleeves he's never worn before. He's got a belt on. I'm smacking him in his back, and he goes from a 500-pound squat to 560. Now, you know, fast forward 3 weeks, it's Monday, it's 10 a.m. Okay, the kid doesn't have the belt, the kid doesn't have the knee sleeves, and he's supposed to hit 90% for 3 sets of 1. I mean, and the kid fails on the first rep. I've seen it before. I've done it before, right? I've made that mistake. And it's, again, you know, what are you really trying to accomplish? What are you really trying to do when you are trying to chase these 1 RMs? Like, you're trying to chase all these big 1 RMs. What are you really trying to do? Because the point of it being is supposed to get a better indicator of what their maximal strength capabilities are at that point in time. That's it. You know, we don't make a big deal about it. Like, we hit 90% for a single. I measure the velocity. I have an average velocity. I have a peak velocity. And I'm able to go ahead and get an idea. Okay, he's right around, you know, 400 pounds. Okay, well, he hit it, you know, this much faster. Okay, he's at 425 now. Okay, good. Because all we're trying to do is keep progressive overload going, right? That's all we're trying to do. So I think that's one of the biggest flaws I see, is these guys that they go in and they flaunt it, and they're like, you know, all the, you know, bench press is one of, and I'm probably gonna get some slack for this, but bench press is one of on my totem pole of exercises that are important. It's on the bottom. An overhead press is so much more beneficial for any football player at any position, okay, versus a bench press. Well, how many times do you see a football player lay down on the ground and press something off? Because Gail Hatch used to say, yeah, you take that 400-pound bench presser, and I'll take my 300-pound cleaner, and he could use that bench press to press that guy off when he flat backs. That's the only reason.
There you go. There you go.
You know, so again, it's just, it's an ego deal.
And I think the bench, the reason why the bench got so important was, and I think that's a good lesson for all of us. We shouldn't measure things just because they're easy to remember, to measure. Mm-hmm. And the bench is an easy measurement. You know, people are flat. It's hard to cheat. It's hard to, but it is just such an easy thing to measure, and you can put a lot of weight on it. I mean, that's why high schools sometimes they have just one recorder rank and publish up there, and it's the bench press.
Well, I had a coach I worked with, right, and he's an old school coach, and he kept barking. We need more 400-pound benches. I said, it's okay, there's 400-pound benches. So I looked up the strength coaches he had in the past, and they're notorious for having 4 hands on the bar versus 2, right? Bench press is supposed to be 2 hands. And that's what you see a lot too, is these guys have hands on the bar. Like you said, you know, testing in general is not standardized across the country. It's not. Like squat depth, you know, you look at bench press, hands on the bar, boards, all these things, et cetera, right? Like, it's not standardized. So when all these people are like, well, I got all these 500-pound squatters, and then you realize they're squatting to a 24-inch box. You know, it's not the same as, okay, I got all these squatters, and this guy's going, you know, ass to grass, knees below, or hips well below hip crease, right? That's besides the point. But I had a coach who just kept 400. So I said, okay. I said, all right, I want you to understand something. As soon as you put one pinky in the bar, okay, you get an increase of about 10%. Like, I got to find the study, and I'll put it on Twitter, and I'll piss everybody off. So he said, "Oh, bullshit." I said, "Okay, come on." So I brought him down the weight room. I put 225 on him.
Yeah.
I said, "All right." I said, "Hit it 3 times," right? And he struggled to hit it 3 times. I said, "Okay, hold the bar." And now I put my hands on the bar. I said, "Hit it 5 more times." And he hit it 5 more times with ease with my hands on the bar. He got up and he's like, "Okay, I get what you're saying." Like, again, why would someone want to go ahead and train off a 400-pound bench max if their real max is only 315 pounds? You know, and then we wonder why that we have pec tears, and
Right.
we wonder why there's triceps getting ripped, or why when guys are squatting we have all these lumbar issues. Like, to me, that always goes back to prescription. That's always going back to load prescription. Is the intensity appropriate, which goes back to having a real 1RM or a good indicator of a velocity that they're supposed to be in? And then it looks at total load, which is going to be volume. Or you have the appropriate volume. And that's one of my other big complaints is, you know, we over prescribe volume as a strength and conditioning community. It is abundant. It is abundant. We put so much volume on these kids, okay? And then we're like, oh, well, they'll adapt. There's, you know, strong survive, all that. No, like, we are causing maladaptation. Okay, we are causing maladaptation. We're bringing down the athletic qualities that we're really trying to build upon. Okay, and we're putting these kids at risk for getting hurt. Okay, if a kid gets a lumbar disc because of prescription, that is the strength coach's fault. The same way when you see what running, you know, I look at running like conditioning volumes. Like, you can't go into early offseason and be like, you know what, we need to get tougher. We're going to run 8,000 yards this session, right? And then we wonder why we're in the headlines for bad things like rhabdo cases and you know, knock on wood, like all these other, like, you know, the McNair deal at Maryland. Like, you see all these different things, and this comes back to me. It's like, if you have the appropriate volume, like, your job is to keep the kid safe. Your job is to keep the kid safe and for this kid to help him become more athletic, to help him be resilient to injuries, not cause injury. Well, you cause injury by bad planning. And that a lot of that goes to, you know, like, strength coaches make a lot of emotional decisions. You know, you get in a session and you're it's not going the way you want. And I've been guilty of this, so I'm speaking from my experience. You're pissed off. You're supposed to be running tempos, and a kid jumps off sides 5 times in a row, and then he tells you to go F yourself. You know, like, you're going to make an emotional decision right then and there, and you might end up running 15 extra ones, which is definitely not what beneficial to the athlete. But you see it, that to me is something that is rampant. Like, that's all over the place.
I love it. I got like 2 more questions, and then we will open it up if there's anybody that has questions. Hell, I might have 3 questions. I have 3 questions. You talk about 2 rabbits, and that's one of the things I talk about all the time. And it's basically a metaphor of prioritizing things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that whether you're a parent, a teacher, a businessman, a coach, an S&C, that the average person's not really wondering which of the 2 rabbits. It's more like they're chasing like 10 rabbits. And I think that that's just something we have to ask ourselves all the time. Can you give an example of your prioritization, maybe, and maybe what you think is a wrong prioritization?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll use what I have. So, you know, a lot of this thought process is been stimulated by Bushak Snyder. I went and saw him speak. Again, I keep bringing him up because he's one of my main points of reference with a lot of my thought process. I saw him speak. It had to be 2015 or 16 down at Mike Young's place in Cary, North Carolina, and he had a whole presentation on compatibility and complexity of training. Okay, so having this ability to have compatible training. So to me, it's about marrying things that are going to benefit them. Like, so basically, it's about taking these exercises that are going to build into that workout and benefit that workout. So a good example is, like, I want to do sprint work first. Okay, so I'm going to sprint first, right? Even in if I have jumps planned that day, I'm going to sprint first. That's my main priority. I'm going to sprint first, right? Then I'll do jumps. Then I'll do explosive jumps, right? Or loaded jumps, like a barbell jump. Then I'll turn around and I'll do an Olympic lift. Then I'll move into my strength portion, right? Because maximal strength and explosive ability are compatible. They work together.
Love it.
Okay, I'm getting potentiation from my sprints, from my jumps, from all these different things. And by the time I get into my squats or my single leg squats, whatever it is, my brain is on fire. Like my central nervous system is primed. I am ready to go, and I've already created some really good pathways for my muscles to talk to my brain, and my brain is talking to my muscles at an optimal rate, and I'm able to create force. I'm ready to create force. Okay, so that's how, to me, that's a good example of compatibility, right? I am marrying stressors of that day together. Okay, a bad way was you take that same day and you say, okay, I did all that. I sprinted, I jumped, I did explosive lifting, and I did heavy lifting. Now let's go run a mile.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example. But you see it all the time.
You see it all the time.
You see it all the time. And I think a lot of times, I think it's because coaches are really freaked out about not getting things in. So they feel like they have to put it all in. And they have to put it all in today. And they're like, oh, I have to get them in. I have to get our tempos in. I have to get this exercise in. And then you compromise what the main emphasis of the day was. And I think that's extremely important, is to really, when you go and plan whatever lifting, running you got going, you have to make an emphasis of the day, and you have to make an emphasis for that block of training, whatever that block might be. All right, because that's your guide. If I'm like, okay, well, this 4 weeks, yeah, we're gonna do a lot of acceleration work, but this is gonna be we're gonna really focus on maximal strength. We have to, whatever reason, right? I have to focus on maximal strength. Well, then you better make sure that your days match up to what your main emphasis of that block is. And then you see it so often, and I saw it. We're like, yeah, we're gonna get really strong. It's maximal. This day, big squat Friday. We're gonna get really strong. We're gonna emphasize squat, lower body strength, and then they go out and they run stadiums.
Yeah.
All right. So you completely negated the adaptation you were chasing, the stimulus you were chasing, because now you made murky water, right? Like you turn around and you added a whole nother stimulus to this. So your body's looking and guessing, like, I don't know what the hell to do. Like, I don't know how to respond to this at all.
And then you throw in, you were talking about compatible stuff, and I love that idea. And in my brain, I'm thinking we got to make today compatible with tomorrow as well. And
Absolutely.
so many coaches disrespect tomorrow.
Yeah, and you see it all the time. It's like, okay, this idea of let's do a really hard conditioning session, and let's do another one the next day, and another one the next day, and another one the next day. And you're like, well, our kids are getting really tough. They're doing really well. Well, not really, man, because you're taking away from so many other things. So again, like you said, like I like to have an undulated style week where we have a performance day where it's going to be neural driven. It's central nervous system driven. Okay. Followed by a day where it's not, it's more of an upper body lift, and it's more of a tempo style running. All right. Like based similar to your X Factor.
Yep.
Where it's undulated through the week, because that allows, we have all these biological processes and systems in our body, and they all have different adaptation rates. And a lot of strength coaches, don't understand them and don't respect them, right? Because it's not just about planning for the stress. It's easy to plan stress. You say it all the time. It's easy to get someone tired, but how do you get them to adapt and get better? And that's where that rest part comes in and is critical. You have to plan the rest just like you plan the stress. They go hand in hand. And that's where a lot of people lose it. And that's where, Boo really shined a light on it for me. It's like, we all hear it all the time. Central nervous system, if it's really fatigued, is 72 hours to up to 2 weeks, right? Like Paul Quinn said, it could be 2 weeks after a max out deadlift session. He said, he always used to talk about that. And it's stuck in my mind. So why would you put sprinting on Monday and then Olympic lifting Tuesday with heavy squats, with jumps on Wednesday? Like you're not allowing any adequate rest. So how are you supposed to adapt? How are you supposed to maximize these windows of adaptation if there is no window? If the window's always shut. And that's what kills me is I see, and I've worked for people before, Paul Jackson did an unbelievable job of it. Tommy Moffitt did an unbelievable job of it. But I worked for people before where it's like, It's like, that doesn't make sense there. It doesn't make sense there. Like, if this is a really hard day, why would you go ahead and make another hard day? And then their response is always, well, you know, Monday's practice is really hard, so Tuesday's practice is really hard, so I'm trying to get them ready for that. I'm like, we're not in season. You know what I'm saying? We're not in season. We're trying to bring up performance and trying to, that's the whole point of training, right? Is to bring up performance and then build up resiliency to injuries.
Yep.
Well, resiliency is the volume side of it. Okay. Performance side of it, you gotta chase performance metrics, which means if I'm chasing sprinting, maximal sprinting, like I have to respect the recovery periods for maximal sprinting. I have to. Or else they're not going to get faster, just going to get worn down. And then your sessions are going to be less effective. And when they're less effective, you know, like everyone's is seeing it. Charlie Francis always telling you, if you're not above 90% of your maximum velocity, you're not getting any adaptation sprint wise. You said it in this presentation, like, you know, jogging and sprinting at max speed are completely different things. Okay, well, if you're tired, you're only going to jog. Okay, like last night, I played basketball. I was tired. I couldn't jump to get any rebounds. I got about the 1/3 amount of rebounds I normally do because I was tired. Well, it's the same thing for these kids. Like if they're tired because you're just beating them into the ground because you have high intensity after high intensity exercise, okay, you're gonna have issues. And then, like you said, where you pair with weeks, you talk about going week to week to week. All right, you start to run into issues and you start to see overuse injuries. You start to see all, like we talked about, herniations and weird soft tissue injuries, like you start to see things that you shouldn't see, or you just start to see guys decrease their performance. I mean, they don't jump higher. They're not gaining muscle mass.
Right.
And then they start to look at you like kids know they're smart. They know when they're getting better. That's one thing, I might not know my ass from my elbow, but I know this. I know kids know when they're getting better and when stuff matters. Okay. And when it doesn't matter, I've seen that. I've been part of a program like that before. When it doesn't matter, you start to get a lot of side conversations from these kids talking about, why am I not getting bigger? Why have I gotten faster? You've heard it before too. I know you have. You send the kid to college and he comes back and he's slower and he's like, well, what the hell? To me, the best way to get buy-in is to show progress. You can't show progress.
100%.
They can't get better unless you have the adequate amount of rest.
You have to, and I think you have to care about your kids seeing progress. You can't just say, I see progress. You have to care that they see it too, because that's motivation.
Absolutely.
You don't get motivated if you're staying the same. You're probably going to quit if you stay the same.
You know what my best buy-in tool is before and after pictures. Before and after pictures.
You do that a lot. I love that.
Because the kids, I get shocked sometimes at some of these kids at how much they develop and they change or as they mature. But the kids themselves, it's like they turn into Superman. And then again, we talk about, what are we also trying to do? We're trying to build confidence. I want my kids on game day to walk into a game day thinking that they're unbeatable. Well, how do you do that? You tell them the entire offseason, then you show them that the offseason paid off. What's the best way to do that? Is to show them, okay, hey, you went from 22 miles an hour to 23 miles an hour. They're like, holy shit, I'm a whole mile per hour faster. Yes, sir. Okay, you went from 190 pounds to 200 pounds. And then you show them the picture and they're like, oh my God. And they go post it all over the internet. They show their mom, they show their dad or their guardian. And it's the best thing in the world. You're giving them confidence, right? That's a huge part of it is playing is a lot of it has to do with confidence. A lot of it has to come from preparation. They have to, again, and it creates buy-in into your overall organization in the program. Because if they walk into the camp and they're like, I had the best offseason of my life. Look at my before and after picture. Look at my performance numbers. Man, I'm going to have a good camp. That's a hell of a lot better attitude than, man, I'm really tired. I haven't gained weight in 3 years. Like I feel about the damn same. Like that's a different feeling. So again, like you said, like we're trying to get these kids confidence. We're trying to show them progress. And then it's for me too. Like strength coaches aren't hard enough on themselves when kids don't get results.
Ooh.
Okay, that's a fact. We're quick to blame practices. We're quick to blame the kid. We're quick to do all these things, but we don't want to self-audit our own programs. Like I've done shit that has not worked. Everyone has. Everyone has. But the beauty of it is I know when it's not working and I'm going to fix it. I'm going to change it because I'm going to be able to get feedback. I'm able to get feedback through all the testing that we do. I'm able to get feedback from the attitude of the kids. Because I've done things that I thought were going to be a hit. I'm like, man, this is going to be good. And the kids are like, coach, what are we doing? I'm like, oh no, and then it doesn't produce, because again, intent is such a critical component of training. And people forget that intent, like willingness to focus and really put effort into something, is such a critical component. And you talk about all the time, like when kids have fun, when kids love what they do, they attack it, and there's a hell of a lot more intent. And it's our job to motivate them. What the greatest motivation is, creating more intent, right? And how do you do that? You do that by them buying into what they're doing. So when I'm saying, like, we got our kids, our verticals one time in the off season, they made a 1-inch jump on average as a team, okay, because we got our VMAX pros. And I was like, all right, if you're not jumping over 2.5 with this weight on the bar and peak velocity, then that ain't it. You ain't gonna make it to the NFL, right? And then all of a sudden I'm watching them all jump, and the kid's getting a 3-2, and he's yelling across the room to the guy, I got 3-2, and he's yelling back across the room. Oh, that's cute. I got 3-5. And then all of a sudden our team average on vertical jump, when we tested it, went up an inch that week. And I'm like, holy crap. I'm like, oh my God.
Of course it did.
Huh? Yeah, because
I probably need to throw this out there that people that want to know more about the VMAX Pro, Mark Hoover is a member of TFC, and he works. He's just a real good question and answer guy with that. And I wanted to ask you one more question before we open it up, and that is, 4 years ago I wrote my first football article, and I said that this would never happen. It's a pipe dream, but I think that football coaches should measure speed a couple times a week throughout the season.
mm-hmm.
And the reason why no coach would ever do that is because he knows his guys are getting slower.
Yeah.
And because of that, he'll never do it. And here, 4 years later, over 100 schools I know of are doing it. And they post the fact that they're like 60% of the kids are hitting PRs in their last week. What I have learned from all this is that I think the speed that you can run is a pretty good barometer of your health and well-being. For example, if you have a wide receiver that runs 22 in the off season, and he's running 19 miles an hour going into the last game, something's wrong.
Absolutely.
With him, with the program, with the practice. So what happens is coaches that find that, they adjust stuff, that they do, and that's usually the problem. They do less, try to do it better, undulate, or I call it the wave theory of practice. And it's just amazing to me that that's actually happening some. Do you see anything like that in your program?
Yeah, I think what you emphasize is what you get. So like what you're talking about is, if you could show coaches the value of monitoring speed in general, and then also putting a premium on, okay, like we want these kids to get faster. And that's, like you said, it's a good indicator of health for a lot of reasons, right? Reactive strength. If you're still running fast, it means your reactive strength's high. It means your relative body strength's high.
Yep.
Okay. It means that you're not in a complete fatigue state. You're not overreaching, not overtraining.
Your nervous system is not diminished.
Exactly. And you look at that, to me, it's a good indicator of health. I would 100% back that statement. And then I also look at it's the confidence side of it too.
Ooh, yeah.
I mean, we got kids here who are like, man, I ran my fastest speed in week 11. I'm ready to go. And it's like, all right, let's ride. Let's go. And I agree with you. I think there has to be there's a need for it. There's a push for it. I think it needs to continue. Because of the benefits of it. There's so many benefits of it.
Well, sometimes it's not the coach's fault. It's not the weight room's fault. Sometimes the kid's not getting sleep. But we can address that. What my point is, if a kid is slow compared to their former self, it's got to get fixed. Yeah. Whatever it is. And a lot of times, especially in high school and college, there's a lot of guys that sleep 5 or 6 hours.
Yeah.
And we need to expose that. Yeah. And say, this is the reason why you're not as good as you were 2 months ago.
Well, I think it starts with conversation. Like you said, I think it enligns you to the fact that you need to have conversations and interventions with these kids. And then we've seen that too. You get a kid, he's, all right, he's only hit 16 miles an hour and his top speed was 20 miles an hour in the summertime. He's only hitting 16 now on average. And you go and you talk to him, you're like, well, what's the deal? Oh, my girlfriend just broke up with me. My groin's kind of nagging. It's not pulled, but it's nagging me. And, like I'm not eating a lot. And then all of a sudden that's a conversation to where now you could sit down and help that kid. But all right, you're gonna come in, we're gonna do some soft tissue work with you. I'm gonna get the nutritionist with you. You're gonna eat a damn meatball sub that we have in here for you right now. Put that down. I want you to drink a ton of water and get off Twitter for 2 days because your girlfriend's on there talking bad about you, right? Like, but what shocks me is how, like you said, is how fast some of these interventions take hold, right? Like the kid goes from one day he gets 4 hours of sleep, the next day he gets 9 hours of sleep, and all of a sudden he's, that hamstring that was tight and sore is gone. Or the fact that he hit 18 miles an hour for 4 weeks straight, and then all of a sudden he gets a little bit of sleep, and now he's hitting 22. And you're like, well, what, damn, like, because these kids, the one thing that they are is that they bounce back and they adapt quick, right? They're elite. Some of these kids are higher end athletes, and a little bit, it's like miracle grow for them. You give them a little bit of something and they adapt extremely fast. And that goes with sleep. That goes with eating right. That goes with hydrating right. That goes with, like you said, the lifestyle component, which is such an overlooked part of it. But you're not going to get that if you're not connected to the kid and you don't understand what's going on. And a lot of times these metrics are going to be the first thing to tell you something's going on.
In my 25 years of coaching football, not one time would any coach that I've ever coached with been aware of a kid running 2 miles an hour slower than he did at the start of the season. Yeah. Not one time. So we had no metrics going on. Basically, we just played football. And I think that you're coaching in the dark if you do that.
Absolutely. I look at it here. We have a daily report that comes out after practice, and it not only has body weight information, it has all our GPS metrics, it has all our jump metrics. If we tested that day, it has a soreness chart that we do with all of our starters and our backups in the morning time. And if anyone is dinged on more than 2 things, it's a red flag. Yes. And all the coaches are notified. All the coaches understand. The nutrition is notified. We're notified. The trainer is. So we're all in the same wavelength. Well, okay, this kid, he came in. He said his hamstring was on a 7 out of 10. Okay, he's down 4 pounds, which means he's dehydrated. All right, he said he didn't sleep. Okay, let's not put 7,000 yards on this kid today. And I tell the position coach, I'm like, hey, man, like, check your boy out. Talk to him. I'm going to talk to him too. You talk to him, but watch out. And again, if it's a coach's discretion, it's not a perfect world. The coach is like, well, he's got to tough it out. Let's go. Yep. And then he pops his hamstring. I'm like, well, now you don't have him. Like I told you, but also it's a CYA for us as well, because it's like I'm communicating to these coaches up front. How can they blame me if I already predicted or told them something potentially might happen? And then when it does happen, they look at me like, oh, like we had an instance where we came back from COVID. Okay, we came back from our COVID in the summertime in 2020. And I told all of our coaches, I said, we do not need to rush into 7-on-7 and 1-on-1s and all that stuff. I was like, a lot of these kids haven't done anything. I was like, there's going to be an injury. There's something that's going to happen. Give me 4 weeks just to get them back a little bit. Go figure. Day 2, they're doing 7-on-7 because the coach told them to do 7-on-7 without telling me. All right. And I get a catastrophic knee injury where the kid's patella, his ACL, and his PCL went. All right. And the head coach looks at me because the head coach didn't know about it either. And he goes, did you tell him to do something? I said, hell no. He goes, all right. He would call the staff and he goes, whatever Joey says for the next 4 days or for 4 weeks, y'all shut up and you're going to do exactly what he's talking about. But then it gave me merit because going into the season, because it's like, if I tell you this kid has potential, not that it's going to happen, but there's potential for an injury if this kid continues down that path, and we could potentially prevent it. When you want to prevent it, when you want to say, oh, I stopped that car accident before that car accident happened, right? If you have that potential to do that, you should take it. You should definitely do it. Always, like you say, be conservative, be reserved, save today for tomorrow. I
love it.
Because all that matters is practice is extremely important, but you don't win Saturday's game on Tuesday. You don't. You win it on Saturday. You win it on Saturday. So if you don't have those players for Saturday, how the hell are you going to win? The best ability is availability.
Love it. Joey, you've been great, man. If there's anybody that that has questions, you need to get them up real quick here, so we don't keep Joey any longer. You just have one kid, right? Oh, you have two.
Yeah, I got a baby girl. She's 4, going to be 5. I got an 8-year-old boy.
Yeah. Now, you don't tweet as much about your girl, though.
I will soon. She's running track this year.
Oh, there you go, man. Yeah, we want to experience, the Guarascio kids growing up.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
I love it.
She's
as a coach, I was a coach's kid, and being a coach's kid is the greatest life in the world. I mean, it's exciting. You're always looking forward to the next game.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of coaches give up coaching to spend more time with their family or something. But man, there's not a better profession to bring your kids along. And it sounds like you do that.
Oh yeah, I mean, he's got some experiences that some kid, like, he's so spoiled with some of the experiences he's had. He's got to get in front of the team after a practice and talk to him and give him a motivational speech. I mean, he's 8, and he goes up there with all the confidence in the world and bravado. He's like, yeah, and he's talking to him. He's been in the locker room after we've won, and all our guys love him. I try to bring him around as much as possible because this is a demanding job. The time component is real, especially in college. It's real. And I always told myself, I'm not going to let that be an excuse for me not being around my kids. So any opportunity my kids can be up at the facility, and I'm very blessed to work for a head coach that allows them to.
Yes.
He promotes it. He promotes family coach Taggart. He definitely does. And I was like, I'm going to have him up here. So my son's up. My son, in the whole summer, he was here every workout. He was here for breakfast every day. He was here for every workout they ran. I mean, they taught him how to play spades. He knows stuff I don't know.
Oh.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh. Well, I mean, my favorite memories of childhood were buses, locker rooms, games, concession stands, all that stuff. And I remember there's nothing better for a little kid than to have an athlete treat them well. I mean, those were like the greatest moments of my life. And I just think that you need to turn it up even. You can have that kid come to work with you a lot. How long are your days?
Right now they're pretty tame. Once we get into off season, you're talking about 12-hour days. Because I like to be available to these players. Like, that's a big point of emphasis for me. So, I'll hang out. We'll keep the nutrition room open until about 5. And we get in about 5. We start groups around 7. They eat breakfast at 7. We actually start groups at 8. But you got to connect with kids and you got to spend time with them, right? To be able to coach them hard, and I coach hard. Like, I'm not a sunshine and rainbows coach. Like, I'm going to coach you hard. I'm going to be demanding of you. And in order to do that, you really have to connect with them, and you got to spend time with them, connect with them. You have to know them, and that comes with being available to them. How many times I've had coaches who are like, yeah, I got open door policy, and you walk by the door and so it's closed. And it's, you don't get to know them. And then if you don't get to know them when they coach you a certain way, you're going to be like, well, man, he's just on me. Versus,
and also kids see authenticity. Every single kid sees whether you are who you say you are, and they see right through the BS. So yeah, I think I think you have that going in spades. Anybody that's around you, they see that and they want to be that themselves. And I can't thank you enough for coming on TFC for the second time. And you're just one of us, man.